man. Wow, man, it's been quite a journey. 21 years in college basketball.
Yeah.
11 of those years I spent at the University of Florida. 7 of those years I was a head coach. My first head coaching gig was at Chattanooga in Tennessee. Was fortunate enough to have a phenomenal team there. When I took the job, we had 100% retention. Nobody left, which is rare in college
Yeah.
basketball, especially when there's coaching change. And got a chance and an opportunity to coach a game in the NCAA tournament. We were a 12 seed. Indiana was the 5. I don't know how they were a 5 seed since they won the Big Ten that year.
Yeah.
But it was, it was a surreal moment for me to be able to do that, having been a former student manager. Never played in college. Got my foot in the door at the University of Florida, and just worked my way up. And to be able to become an Atlantic 10 head coach. My next stop was at the University of Massachusetts, and it was 5 years that I was there, and there was a lot of learning, a lot of growing, some growing pains, and then made a little bit of a pivot and got into television, and have really grown in this space. And I'm actually in Stamford, Connecticut right now. I'll be in studio tonight. We got a doubleheader tonight. We got a great game in Illinois versus SIU Edwardsville, and then Marquette, George Mason. So we'll be covering both those games. So I think for me right now, I'd thought about going back into coaching. I thought about, going with Chris Mack actually to the College of Charleston. But I like where I'm at in this space right now. My family's happy living down in Florida. I've got 3 kids, 11, 9, and 3 years old. So the stability piece of them, enjoying where they're at right now. And I'm not ruling out coaching and going back to the sideline, but I feel like the growth that I've had in this media space is the space that I want to stay in for now.
That's awesome. No, that's really cool. You you talk about your track record, and having guys stay at a university, and it's such a big deal, and especially nowadays with where players can honestly jump around from university to university pretty easily at this point in time. And at times they have really good reason to, other times maybe not so much, or we don't know. We don't always know the full story, but maybe you can at least, at the very least, I'd love to hear a little bit of your thoughts on honestly the transfer portal, and then also from your side of things, like how did you feel like you kept those guys to stay loyal to one place?
Yeah, well, I think a couple things. And the 2 spots that I stopped at were completely different in terms of where the programs were at culturally.
Yeah.
When I got to Chattanooga and I knew they had a really good team, they were an older team. There were some guys that were there. I was their 3rd head coach.
Okay.
And I think those guys wanted to stay together. They wanted to prove a point that, hey, look, we don't care who's getting the job. We're going to stay. And I walked through the door, and Connor, the first thing I said to the entire team was, fellas, I'm here to help. This is not about me. I'm here to steer the ship. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't have to overcoach. I think young coaches sometimes, especially when they get their first gig, they tend to overcoach. I didn't have to do that. I just had to go in there and steer the ship, and that's exactly what happened. I think the landscape of college basketball with NIL and with the transfer portal, I do think there's some positives, but I think we've got to get a hold of it. It just can't be a free-for-all and free agency where guys can just go wherever they want. I mean, you see some of these kids that are on their 4th, some of them 5th schools. I think that's what we've got to get a hold of. And look, anytime there's a coaching change, I feel like players should have the freedom to be able to leave.
Yeah.
But I think there's got to be some parameters that are
Sure.
look, in the NBA, even in free agency, there's rules.
Yeah.
We just don't have a lot of rules right now, and I think we got to get a hold of that concept.
Sure. That makes sense. And, kind of thinking about, maybe some of the negative aspects, or, negative reasons why a player would leave a university just outside of maybe NIL opportunities. And it kind of begs the question, because when we look at the last few drafts for the NBA, we're seeing more and more players who are coming outside of those universities. We can see the overtime elite. There's been a few players who've come from that. We've seen players coming from overseas. We see players who are maybe just in the G League, coming into the draft. So it kind of begs the question, are the U.S. universities preparing guys for the NBA as well as what they used to maybe 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, look at Dalton Connect. I mean, look at what he's
Yeah,
doing right now with the Los
right.
Angeles Lakers. I mean,
Incredible
talking about an older player
player.
transferred to the University of Tennessee.
Yeah,
Had it not been for a guy named Zach Edey, who would have been National Player of the Year. So I do still think that there's certain coaches that put a price tag on development.
yeah,
But we see in, I mean, the country of France. I mean, what's going on over there, and the players that are coming over to the NBA and
yeah,
from their country, namely Wimby, Wimbyana. So, I do think that certain coaches still put that price tag on development, on individual instruction, on getting guys better, and not just look, the rules have changed. When I got into this whole deal, I was the graduate assistant at the University of Florida. You couldn't work with your players. The student managers were in charge of working players out back in 2006, 2007. That's
yeah,
how I kind of got my foot in the door in terms of development, and we put a price tag on it. Billy Donovan put a huge price tag on development. So certain coaches still doing it. Certain
yeah,
coaches aren't. Certain coaches are just going to practice full
yeah,
on all summer long,
yep,
5-on-5, fly it up and down the floor. Let's go.
yep,
But I do think that you've got certain programs, certain college coaches that still put that price tag on development.
yeah. And I tell you what, you talk about, you just keep repeating that word development. And having talked to, over the last 2 or 3 months, having talked to people from all sides of this industry, whether it be coaches, whether it be skills trainers, whether it be strength trainers, talking to physical therapists, talk to doctors. And that's the kind of common theme that we see with all of them is people who are having success, the ones who kind of are ready for that next level, really put a big price tag on development, like you said.
Yeah.
And maybe you can dive a little bit deeper into what does that mean. Like, you talk about, development versus 5-on-5, where maybe 5-on-5 you don't see that development. Then what in what areas would we see perhaps development from a college coach's perspective?
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a great question, Connor. And in fact, I have a really close friend down in Jupiter, Florida, who has an AAU team and his son's AAU team. And, I've talked to him a lot. I mean, these kids are in eighth grade. I've talked to him a lot about getting better, skill development, learning how to come off a ball screen and make the right read and make the right play, right? Everyone wants to
Yeah.
run different roles, but do they know exactly how to set them? Do they know at what angle
Mhm.
to set them? Do they know what
Yes.
they're looking for when they come off? Do they know where the tag is and where the help's coming from? And can I make that pass and read that help? Like things like that, like teaching young players how to play the
Yeah.
game. I think that's
Yeah.
where Europe is in front of us right now because
Okay.
players overseas, they get taught how to play the game. I go to some of these AAU tournaments and I see seventh, eighth graders, and it's just run around the floor. Let's trap as many people as we can. Let's try to create turnovers and get layups. When
Yeah.
all you're doing is using your athleticism, you're not teaching them how to play, which is not preparing them for high school, which ultimately is not preparing them for the next level if they have aspirations of playing in college. So I just
Definitely.
think there needs to be so much more of a price tag put on teaching how to play.
Yeah.
Teaching, hey, look, if I get the ball in transition, can I make an outlet pass, an advanced pass if I see someone open? Can I make a move? Or can I play one on one? Can I beat someone one on one and get to the rim? And here's the other thing: can I make
Yeah.
layups? Can I get to the rim, play off 2 feet, and make layups? I think we've got to put way more emphasis on stuff like that.
Yeah. We it's such a, as we are, at one point in time, we were the younger people, and we hear, these old heads, for instance, saying, oh, you got to have the basics down. But as we get older, we really understand like what they mean by, you got to have that foundation. You have to have those basics down because, and honestly, in reality, that's really what helps you, continue on and have a good career. But it's also understanding, okay, not just making a layup, but having the right reads so that that layup becomes a lot easier, right?
Like
You talk about coming
teaching
off a screen.
angles,
Yeah.
teaching angles, like especially angles in transition. Like if I come down and I'm trying to beat someone one on one, I know how to create an angle where I can get to the rim and go finish. Like things like
Yeah.
that. It's not just, hey, look, here he is one on one. Let me go in out crossover and get to the rim. No, like initiating contact,
Yeah.
using your body, playing off 2 feet. All
Yeah.
things like that need to continue to be taught, especially to young players.
Yeah. Can you go into a little bit more depth when you say play off of 2 feet? Because I know, having worked with a lot of high school athletes, they're unsure of what that means when they say play off 2 feet. In their minds, they just think, well, I got to dunk off 2 feet. and that's the scope of what they think playing off 2 feet is. Can you dive a little bit deeper on what that
I
means?
think young players don't really understand that. Look, when you're the only time you get an opportunity to have a wide open layup or a wide open dunk is in transition when there's a
Mhm.
steal, there's a run out, or anything
Yeah,
like that. 9 times out of 10, you're playing in traffic.
yeah,
And if I stand on one leg, am I going to be able to absorb contact and go up and finish?
yeah,
No, I'm not. But if I play off two, I have so much more balance. I'm able to absorb that contact and get up there and finish. So I think that's trying to explain that piece of it. Very rarely are you going down the lane
yeah.
and are going to be able to just jump off one leg and have a wide open shot. That doesn't happen. So can I get in the lane and play with some balance so I can absorb contact and go up and finish? I think it's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and I think one scenario of that has actually really been kind of jumping on Instagram a lot lately, just because of the event. But like the Vince Carter dunk on Alonzo Mourning, 20 years ago, and being able to absorb that contact and still finish. Now, obviously, is everyone going to have the verticality of Vince Carter? Probably not. But like you said, he's in traffic and he learned to absorb that contact and still play through that. And we see that with a lot of players at that higher level who are just fantastic finishers. So,
Well, I think look right now, who's one of the best finishers in the entire game? It's got to be John Morant, right? So when you
do
watch
you see
John
that
Morant,
360?
when you see him play, he's always playing off two
Yeah,
feet.
yeah,
He's getting in the lane and playing off 2 feet. Look, LeBron doesn't have to play off 2 feet because he's bigger than everybody.
yeah,
So you got to think about
yeah,
that. John Morant's not. Like you think of some of these explosive point guards that we've had, Derrick Rose, John Morant, Russell Westbrook. What makes them so good is their ability to absorb that contact and go down the lane and finish. And a
yeah.
lot of times they're playing off two.
Yeah, you're right. No, no, and that's a great point. And it comes down, like you said, it's not just the verticality of it, but it's the ability to absorb contact, be physical, and be on balance to finish that shot. No, that's such
100%.
a big thing. So when we look at when the college coaches talk about that and things like that, and you talked about how there's still college coaches who do such a phenomenal job of developing and put a price tag on developing players for the NBA. Then do you feel like has the college basketball game changed so much to be more similar to the NBA nowadays, or do you feel like there's maybe more of a gap between college and the NBA today?
Yeah, I think the biggest gap is just the floor spacing.
Okay.
There's so much more floor spacing in the NBA than in the college. The 3 point line's back further, different things like that. You can't load up
Yeah.
defensively, right? You'll
Yeah.
get defense 3 seconds called on you. So I think there is a bit of a gap just in terms of the spacing and the things that you're able to do offensively. Shorter shot clock as well. Look, that 6 seconds is a huge difference when you think about it.
Yeah.
30 seconds on a shot clock to 24. I mean, you can't run continuity offense in the NBA.
No.
You can't. There's just not
Yeah.
enough time. It's all
Yeah.
quick hitters. It's quick sets, and it's playing out of concepts. I think college coaches still want to run continuity on offense and not play nearly as much out of concepts. The NBA is all playing out of concepts.
Okay. And go a little bit deeper what you mean by playing out of concepts. What concepts kind of stick out in your mind the
Yeah,
most?
like I think, whether it's a DHO or whether it's, a slot pick and roll,
Mm-hmm.
making those reads that we talk about, you know, you're not going to come down and really run flow offense and reverse the ball through your four man and get, the ball's not going to change sides of the floor. It's, hey, look, when I drive baseline,
Yeah.
we have to have 3 spots occupied. We have to have the drift, we have to have the diagonal, we have to have the dunker. That has to be every single time
Yeah.
on a baseline drive. If I drive middle and the floor looks like this, where are the spots that we have to get to? I think that's the biggest difference. It's way more out of concepts. If I turn down a pick and roll, what does the floor look like? If I come off a middle pick and roll, what does the floor look like? If it's a pick and pop situation, what does the floor like? Just concepts conceptually in terms of
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And when we see those things, I think one of the teams that one of the teams that has done it consistently extremely well, I think, is Golden State. Golden State has done it extremely well, and then even the last few years, we can look at the Denver Nuggets. Denver Nuggets have done that extremely well, and everyone really understands their role. I mean, we're not seeing these, 5, 10 years ago, we saw these teams that had these big name stars, right? But now the last 2, 3, 4 years, even, we have kind of more of that traditional role player type system where these players really understand where they're supposed to be at all times. And when we look at the Denver Nuggets and how they operate that offense, it's really cool to watch them. And like you said, everyone, they understand these concepts, right? They understand where they should be at all times. And that's such a big deal. So do you feel like then that the college game is is not preparing these guys as much in that space,
Yeah, I
or
mean,
do you feel like
yeah, I think it's hard because look, the college game still, we're seeing traditional centers, we're seeing traditional front court players, we're seeing these traditional centers and front court players stick around and stay in college
yeah,
because an Armando Bacot, I don't know what the number is NIL at North Carolina, but I'm sure he was making a pretty good lick. You
yeah,
know, Hunter at Kansas as well. Like those guys aren't coming out because if you look at the 5 men in the NBA, and I would take Joel Embiid and Jokic and throw them away because
yeah,
those guys are in a class of their
right,
own. Al Horford has found a way to stick in the NBA because he can make corner threes
yeah,
as a traditional front court player.
yeah,
When Al Horford was at the University of Florida, he was ducking in and posting up and different things like that. That's not happening in the NBA nearly as much anymore. But
no,
he can make corner threes and he can rebound, he can guard pick and rolls.
yeah,
So he's going to have a long, long career. And when you think about all the guys that we had at Florida, man, he's still there and he's still
yeah,
doing it and still doing it at a high
yeah,
level. So I think that's the biggest difference is those traditional front court back to the basket players. You're still seeing them in college. You're just not seeing them in the NBA very
yeah.
much.
Yeah, I tell you what, it will be very interesting to see someone like Zach Edey, how his career progresses, because he is that type of player, and he's already having a fantastic start to his season. So I'm very curious to see how that carries on for the next 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 years. So we'll see how that goes. So and then kind of we've talked about so many little small things that play a huge role in an athlete and how they can better themselves or prepare themselves for that game. Talking about that dribbling handoff, talking about those angles. A lot of details when you hear the word details of the game, what comes to your mind for these guys?
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think angles on screens, making sure your shoulders are square to the sideline, reading the coverage. Are they in drop coverage? Are they in, half blitzing, which you don't see a ton in the NBA, but you'll see it in college? Are they, how are they, what am I doing when I'm coming off this ball screen? Who am I looking at? Right? Who do I
Yeah,
need to see? I gotta read my man. I gotta read the coverage. I gotta read the tag. Like I think all those details are extremely, extremely important.
yeah. No, I 100% agree. So then you know, if you're able to give any sort of advice or piece of suggestion to hoopers, young basketball players, maybe as early as high school or even as early as middle school or elementary school, what are you telling them to do to focus on maybe these details of the game?
Yeah.
Is it watching more film? What should they be doing?
I think it's getting in the gym and staying in
Okay.
the gym. Look, playing is important, no question about it.
Yeah.
Playing AAU tournaments is important. I'm not discounting that.
Right.
I think there's a price tag to be put
Of course.
on your development through
Yeah.
playing, but it's also being in the gym, right?
Yeah.
It's learning how to play off 2 feet. It's learning how to make layups on a consistent basis. So many guys go in the gym and they just start hoisting up jump shots. Like, can you make layups? Can you get in the lane and finish? You don't need anybody else in the gym with you to drive down, play off 2 feet, get the ball high up on the glass and finish.
Yeah.
I think things like that are just so valuable. Can you shot fake and get in the lane for a pull-up jump shot,
Yeah.
right? Do you know what a bad shot is? Look, a bad shot is anything inside the three-point line that I'm not in the
Yeah.
lane, right? Like, can I ball fake, take one dribble, and get myself in the paint with 2 feet? I
Yeah.
think so much emphasis needs to be put on that. And that, again, that goes back to development.
Yeah. No, you're right. And putting yourself around, not just being in the gym, but around people who know how to maybe bring out those qualities a little bit better, whether it be a coach, or whether it be a skills trainer, or whether it be, someone who's developing that athletic side of things. And honestly, the way I've always looked at it is, when all three areas, from a coach's standpoint, from a skills trainer standpoint, to the athletic development standpoint, if those three sides are all communicating and in unison, that's where I feel like, these players can really, sky's the limit in terms of development, because now the athlete, the athletic development understands, all right, what qualities we need to develop. And then the skills trainer understands, all right, what skills do we really need to make sure we stand out about this player. And then the coaches understand, it's like, okay, I understand their progression, so I now know the situations I can push him in, or push him to get better at.
Being on the same page, having everybody on the same page eliminates the confusion for the player.
Amen. Definitely.
Right? So the less confused he is, the better he's going to play. So if you can get everybody on the same page, that's the most important thing.
Yeah. It's such a invaluable aspect of the game. And this is one thing I always tell guys who we work with. It's like, hey, I want to know your coaches. I want to know your skills trainers. I want to know everyone who's part of this process, because when I understand their point of view, I understand what my role should be. And then that way we can develop you. Because at the end of the day, look, if these guys aren't developing, if these guys aren't getting, going from a D3 to a D2, or from a D2 to a D1, or going from a D1 possibility to playing professional, these guys aren't getting results. And honestly, at the end of the day, that's how we all do well in this industry, is if guys get results, if guys have success. So making sure that they're, taken care of at the end of the day, and they don't have to put as much focus into figuring out, well, how do I do it? And just understanding, okay, I need to do these things.
Right.
So
100%.
definitely.
100%.
Well, hey, Coach, I appreciate you hopping on this call today. I think it's been just a really great wealth of knowledge that's been shared. And honestly, I know a lot of players will be able to take away a lot of things from this discussion, because, it really you brought out some things that we hear a lot. I hear a lot because I talk to my players, but these guys don't always understand, like, just talk about, details of the game. You talk about the dribble handoff situation. You talk about playing off of 2 feet, and what that actually means. Honestly, that's such a wealth of knowledge. And so I really appreciate you hopping on this today. And I would love to do it again sometime if you ever have a chance.
Absolutely, man. Happy to come on. Appreciate
Awesome.
it. Make sure everybody tune in to Peacock tonight. We got a big doubleheader up here in Stamford, Connecticut. It's nice to get out of Florida and feel a little bit of cool air up here. But always a pleasure, man. And look forward to our next one.
Awesome. Well, hey, you have a good rest of your day and weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, man. Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, buddy.